Okay, so we're going to look at a simple autumn tree. I have got a little bit of raw sienna on a round number 10, and I'm just running that up to start with the tree trunk. I'm going to swap down to around number 6 and dip that into some sepia. Start to blow that up. Because the raw sienna is wet, it's going to have a really nice cylindrical feel. I'm going to flow this one off the page. I'm going to create a jaggedy bottom. Always works well on a tree. Then I'm going to run a little bit of paint up the opposite side. So it's connecting this all together. In fact, I'll get to a certain point that I don't need it. You can see it's got a really nice cylindrical feel. Bring a little bit down here. So just really nice to ground it in. I'm then going to pick up my round number 10 again. I have got some burnt sienna with a dab of water. I will just show you this. There we go. So you can see what I'm working with, what sort of consistency. And I'm loading my brush up. I'm going to hold it flat. I'm going to come in and catch the surface of the paper. So I'm holding the brush like this and catching the surface of the paper. This is a Saunders Waterford paper. It's a rough paper, so I'm basically using the side of the brush to catch the surface and start to create a really nice autumn foliage effect. Burnt sienna is a perfect colour to start this with. You've just got to keep making sure your brush is fairly loaded. If it's not loaded enough, it won't work in the same way. This takes a little bit of practice, but once you've got it, there's no holding you back. Take a little bit, you can bring a bit into, and this is still wet in here, but it will still work coming through into the tree. Break up that line, that trunk line, a little bit. So you can just scrape through. So if I scrape through a little bit more, that's going to create foliage through that part of the tree. And then I'm going to pick up a long thin brush. You can get a rigger, this is a rigger, it's a number 2. Or you can get a line writer. A line writer is slightly shorter, so it's when you're new, it's more helpful for you to control. And then what I'm going to do is start to bring those branches through. So you're just flowing through where you've created that foliage. If it's still a little bit wet, that's perfect because it'll blend in. And with a rigger, if you rest on your little finger, you'll find you can get really nice fine strokes. Makes for really effective trees. You always want to stagger where your branches leave the tree trunk, make it more natural. And you want to make sure that there's no floating foliage. So you always want to make sure you can see a branch coming to it. If it's started to dry, which does happen, just take a damp brush and just touch that bit in and it'll blend through. It's a nice delicate foliage and branches. Now it's often very hard to paint upwards, so I've got a tip for that as well. So if you're finding you're struggling, Just do a few more this side, then I'll show you what you can do. I always like these little wispy bits you get at the bottom of the trees as well. So if I turn this around, and then as I'm staggering, so I'm going to come off here, it's much easier to paint downwards this side. If you're left-handed, so I'm right-handed, it'll be the opposite side that you struggle with. Often I turn it round anyway to do all my branches, because I find that when I paint downwards it's easier to paint to that point. You get those little bits, especially on autumn trees where they're coming through and past where the foliage just drops, you get the little twiggy bits, and then you get these like little Y's, or upside down Y's in this case. They're like little flicks. Work really nicely. I'm going to take another one here to meet that foliage, and then I'm going to bring a thicker one off here to meet this foliage. With a rigger or a line writer, you're in less control, so it makes the branches look more natural. I love doing trees. And autumn's one of my favourite times of the year, when we get to all the autumn colours and all the autumn trees. It's lovely. Come off the page with a few. Always works nicely as well. So if I twizzle that back round, and just clean, dry, with a slightly damp brush just to soften those in, because that has dried on there, and they will nicely soften into that very delicate trunk. Now what's happened up here is the tree trunk had dried and I've come on, but it wasn't quite dry, so it's blended, but it's blended in not a very nice way. So again, I'm just going to soften that in. So this is with a damp brush, I'm just going to blend that through. So I don't want that to be as obvious. It's got a watermark basically, but that can be softened in really easily just by lifting a little bit out. Just do it gradually so you don't lift too much. You see that works really nicely. You can't see that now. So there you go. That's an autumn tree. I'm going to pop another tree one here for you, and a techniques one just here, a playlist, in case you want to look at more trees. I've got lots of tree practice.